Well, good to see you back. And see my wife about the books. I won't tell you more about them, but they're about half price and as a group. And also my website is cstnews.com, and there'll be a lot of articles there on Islam, evolution, death penalty, a lot on politics, again, as it relates to Christianity. So go look at it. I think you'll find some things that will interest you. cstnews.com. Let's pray. Father, thank you now for this time together. Pray that you smile upon our service. Thank you for what you did in the preceding time. And help us, Lord, to try to glorify you, honor you in everything that we do. In Jesus' name I pray, and amen. Reliability of the Bible. If the Bible is not reliable, this world's in a mess. If the Bible is not totally reliable, you're in a mess. And it's amazing the people who say they believe the Bible, but they don't really believe the Bible. They believe it has to be corrected all the time. I asked about 3 questions that I believe clarifies the issue. I asked, is it possible for a holy God, holy, all-powerful God, to inspire a perfect book? Now, because of the definition of words, you have to answer yes. An all-powerful, sovereign God, is it possible for him to produce a perfect book? Well, of course, the answer is yes. Even the skeptics have to say yes because of the word all-powerful. Then I ask, well, can that all-powerful, sovereign God preserve the book that he has inspired? We're not talking about is it. I'm saying, could he do it? Well, yes, of course. He's all-powerful. He can inspire the book, and he can also preserve it. And the Bible, of course, has many verses, passages that prove that the words of God are inspired and preserved. So my next question is, why then would a holy, all-powerful God inspire a book if he would not preserve it? That seems to be stupid, and God doesn't do stupid things. So everybody admits, every Bible believer believes that God did inspire a perfect book. But the question is, then did he really preserve it, or do we have to correct it all the time? And so I believe the Bible is totally inspired, and totally reliable in every area. If the Bible is not reliable in Genesis, it's not reliable in John. And our eternal salvation is at stake. So the problems are not in the Bible. The problems are in the wicked heart of man. Man is totally depraved. Man is untrustworthy. That is, men in general. And when there's a problem in the Bible, and a question, as Dr. Robert Wilson, Greek and Hebrew scholar, said, I attribute it to my ignorance, not to a problem in the Bible. The problem, of course, is in the mind of man. Nelson Gluck was archaeologist, considered the greatest archaeologist in the 20th century. Gluck was a Jew. In his book, Rivers in the Desert, he made an astounding statement. It may be stated categorically that no archaeological discovery has ever controverted a biblical reference. Scores of archaeological findings have been made which confirm in clear outline or in exact detail historical statements in the Bible, close quote. That is an incredible statement, especially when you realize it comes from an unbelieving Jew and an archaeologist, allegedly the greatest archaeologist of the 20th century. And I believe that the Bible, I don't need science, and I don't need archaeology to be the reliability of the Bible. That's just something nice. But other people do need it and want it. But I believe the Bible is totally reliable because it's inspired of God and preserved of God. If the Bible was not inspired, I demand to know some things from my critics. I want to know how Moses knew to circumcise a child on the 8th day of his life. Not the 7th day, not the 9th day. We've only known this for a few years, 50 or so years, that was the optimum time to circumcise a child. I want to know, I demand to know, how did Moses know it thousands of years BC? He knew it by inspiration of the Spirit of God, that it should be on the 8th day. I want to know, how did Moses know that it was life in the blood? We've known that for about 200 years, that life was in the blood. Moses knew about it thousands of years ago. You don't just guess at something like that. He knew about the inspiration of the Spirit of God. How did Moses know that the stars were innumerable? The two experts, Ptolemy and Kepler, about 1,500 years apart, but both experts in astronomy, both said that there were about 1,000 plus stars. Just a few over 1,000 stars. That's all that could be counted without the telescope. Now, wait a minute. If that's true, that these experts said that there were about 1,000 stars, and now we know that the stars are innumerable, how did Moses know that? We now know, depending on the astronomer you talk to, that there are 70,000 million. I didn't stutter. 70,000 million stars in the night sky. Yet the experts said before the telescope, a little over 1,000. An article appeared a couple 3 or 4 years ago that said there are 10 times more stars in the night sky than grains in the sand in the world's deserts and beaches, scientists say. Close quote. Secular article. Wait a minute. There are more stars in the night sky, 10 times more stars in the night sky, than all the grains of sand in all the deserts and beaches of the world. Unbelievable. How did Moses know that then? He knew it by inspiration of God. How did Moses know that infected people should be quarantined? We only known about germs since Pasteur, or really Reddy and Pasteur. And Moses knew that you could be infected, knew about germs, or at least he wrote about it. He probably didn't understand all of this, but it was by inspiration of God. How did Moses know that hands should be washed in running water? How did Moses know that you should never eat from a cracked plate? He knew the danger of bacteria getting into the crack in the plate. We'd only known that for a couple hundred years. How did Job know about the hole in space that Science magazine wrote about only in 1981? But Job knew about it the oldest book in the Bible. How did Job know that? How did Job know about the complete hydrological cycle of evaporation, cloud formation, and evaporation? How did Job know that wind had weight? That's not something you just say, I think wind has weight. In fact, you'd almost think it's silly. How did Job know that was true thousands of years ago? How did Solomon know that winds went in circuits? How did Solomon know that laughter was good for the body, your health, and produced hormones that produced an overall sense of well-being? How did Isaiah know that the earth is round? It seems every school, even major universities, are teaching a falsehood. This is called the second biggest lie ever told by man. And that is that practically everyone, believed that the earth was flat. And if you sail it far enough on the sea, you'll fall over the edge. There's a reason for that, if you know why it's so popular. A man by the name of Washington Irving wrote Sleepy Hollow, the Headless Horseman, and many other. He was the one that popularized Washington throwing the silver dollar allegedly across Potomac and him cutting down the fire tree. He was the first American bookseller, the best-selling bookseller. He was an incredible author. And he wrote about Columbus, his men sailing, and he has the men down on their hands and knees pleading with Columbus not to sail any further because they're going to go over the edge of the world. Well, that's simply silly. It simply didn't happen, not at all. And he popularized it in about 1780, and it became world famous. And so every university in America, I repeat, every university, I don't know of any Christian school where this is an exception even. Christian university. And of course the grade schools and high schools teach us that almost everybody believed the world was flat. Not so. We've known for 600 years BC that the world, and of course we knew back because the scriptures are very clear, the world is round. There were a few bigoted and uninformed, or maybe ignorant, Roman Catholics, priests, that believed that the earth was flat. Basically, All educated people believe that the world was round, going back hundreds of years BC. But yet you can't get what Washington Irving did out of our culture. It's simply not true. It's the second biggest lie of all. A book was published in Europe back many years, maybe 35, 40 years ago, about the different lies that are being told. Anyway, God very clearly teaches that the earth is round. So there's no reason why anybody should believe that it was flat. But even in Greek and the Romans, they all believed that the world, but basically all believed that the world was round. How did Job know that the earth was suspended in space? Again, not something he would just naturally think of. How did Job know about the springs in the sea? How did Job know about frozen oceans? He sure didn't see that at the Gulf of Aqaba or the Persian Gulf. How did he know that? It's all called Bible inspiration. These men in writing didn't understand it all, but they wrote it for our understanding. We're told, and we preach all the time, that God created man, Adam out of dust, and the scientists ridicule. However, NASA, Ames Research Center, said that every element found in dust is found in the human body. That's, to me, quite striking. We're told that, in fact, unbelievers love to ridicule when we talk about unicorns in the Bible, and there are a number of places in the Bible where it indicates that unicorns existed. And some would say, well, they were called something else. Doesn't matter. They were unicorns. And they talk about the one horn, and the Bible indicates that there were two horns at least. But the radicals, the unbelievers, the atheists really take a running spell with this and ridicule. Fact is, folks, there have been hundreds of thousands of species that have been extinct. And I mean, and there are thousands and thousands that are being found all the time. In the last, I've got a list someplace, the last 2 or 3 years, they found thousands and thousands of different species, especially in the oceans, that we never knew existed, and plant species also. And so it's amazing that we'll permit these scientists to ridicule the fact, unicorns, and they laugh. And we say, wait a minute here. There could have been hundreds of thousands of herds of unicorn, and they exist. Or tomorrow on a Peruvian mountainside, they could find a herd of unicorns existing today, right now. No big deal. Just in the last few years, in Nepal, they found an elephant, a live elephant, not fossil. They found a live elephant with a big hump on its back. A huge hump on its back. It's a new species, didn't know anything about until just in the last few years. They also found a live horse, a species totally unknown. So why do we let them get away with trying to make us look like fools when we talk about unicorns? Either they existed for many years and went extinct, or some could be alive today. They love to talk about Sargon in Isaiah 20, verse 1. And they said Sargon, the Syrian king, never existed. It's not mentioned anyplace else in history. And then they found a palace in Khorsabad, and they started doing excavation. And they discovered that they found an inscription that mentioned the very battle that Isaiah 20, verse 1 mentions. And yet now, but you never do you hear these evolutionists and atheists and Bible critics, never do they say, oh, we're so embarrassed. We've been critical and we've ridiculed you folks about this for years. And now, here we are, we know. There's no question that Sargon actually existed. Well, we're sorry. They don't do that. They go right on to another absurdity. Time after time after time. This was true with Nebuchadnezzar. They told us Nebuchadnezzar never existed. He was not found anyplace else in literature. And they said Nebuchadnezzar was just a idea that came up in the minds of Jewish mamas during the Babylonian captivity. And they wanted to tell stories about Daniel and make heroes of some of the Jews. And Nebuchadnezzar never existed. And it's astounding that anybody would say that now. And after a while, they did some excavation in Babylon near Baghdad. And they found thousands of bricks, green, blue, white-colored bricks, enameled bricks, and on the face it says, I am Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. You know, some days it doesn't pay an evolutionist to get out of bed. And that's a kick in the teeth. They've been saying all this time, Nebuchadnezzar never existed. Now we've got thousands of bricks that the scientists have dug up and boasting about him being Nebuchadnezzar. Again, they don't say, we're sorry. We made a fool of ourselves. You Christians were right. Same way with Belshazzar, exactly the same thing with Belshazzar. The critics said Belshazzar was not the last king of Babylon. Nabonidus was. And they ridiculed us, saying, this story about Medes and Persians taking over the city of Babylon and the banquet where Belshazzar saw fingers of a man's hand writing Upharsin, meeny, tickle, Upharsin, and then that's simply not so. It didn't happen. Belshazzar was not the last king of Babylon. Nabonidus was. And then they found a clay cylinder in Mesopotamia, with prayers for the health of King Nabonidus and his son and co-regent Belshazzar. And it seems as if Nabonidus wasn't too thrilled about reigning in the capital, and he liked to be out traveling and did some work digging in the desert, and he left his son Belshazzar to reign, and the Medes and Persians came and killed Belshazzar the king. And months later, Nabonidus came back into the kingdom, found his son dead, kingdom taken, and he was imprisoned for a while by the Medes and Persians, and then given a pension for the rest of his life by the Medes and Persians. But they don't say, we're so sorry. They told us that you people are crazy when you talk about the Hittite civilization. There was no such thing as a Hittite civilization. Nowhere. Nobody says it. Just didn't happen. And then they found a monument in the Euphrates River in Syria, and they realized that the Hittites were a major civilization. In fact, the inventors of iron. And they dominated Mesopotamia from 600 BC to 1200 BC. Again, the experts were wrong. The evolutionists were wrong. The atheists were wrong. Scholars even doubted that King David and Solomon existed, even that they lived. That's amazing. And of course, the Jews aren't too thrilled about that. But the scholars said no. And even if David lived, he was just a crude chieftain on top of a mountainside with a few people around him, head of a tribe. And Solomon, of course, did not reign from the Nile River to the Euphrates. It didn't happen, and didn't have these massive gates and the stables that Solomon had. It simply didn't happen. And then not long ago, in just recent years, in fact, they found the first physical evidence the scientists dug up. It says, House of David, King of Israel. And they found other proofs since then. Pilate, they told us, you people talk about Pilate and Jesus Christ appearing before him. Well, Pilate didn't exist. I mean, you know, if there's a flunky that represented the nation of the Empire of Rome, he's going to be mentioned in some of the literature. Pilate did not exist. What they don't know is, now they know, is that Pilate antagonized the emperor. Bad news when you do that. And now they know that when you antagonize, and Mark Antony found out, when you antagonize the emperor, you're not permitted to name your son by that name. You're not allowed to do business on the day that he was born. Any streets or any cities named after him, totally obliterated. And that's what happened to Pilate. He antagonized the emperor. And then they did some excavating in Caesarea by the sea. I've been there many, many times. And preached in the amphitheater there, out in the open, in fact. And they have slabs about this big, steps about this big, about that thick, all over the amphitheater. And they found one earthquake or something, and it turned over. And on the back of it, it had Pilate's name engraved. First time they ever found Pilate's name. And now, of course, everybody admits, okay. Pilate was a reality. He simply got the emperor angry with him. They tell us that if you find one contradiction in the Bible, of course, the Bible is not true. The Bible is not reliable if you find one contradiction. And just because, by the way, there's some confusion or some misunderstanding, that doesn't mean there's a contradiction. There'll be some places where a lot of people disagree, and we may be wrong on our interpretation or our answer. But they tell us inscription over the cross was 4 different contradictions. Matthew wrote over the cross, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." And Mark, the inscription says, the King of the Jews. Luke says, this is the King of the Jews. And John has over the cross, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. So the Bible skeptic says, there you are. The Bible says, this is what was over the cross. And you have 4 different statements on the inscription over the cross. The Bible is totally unreliable. That means you don't have to worry about getting saved and forget about the blood of Christ. You don't have to worry about hell. No such thing as hell. No such thing as judgment. Hey, folks, everything's okay. But it's so simple. In fact, that's many of the answers for these atheists. And I go into this in my book, The God Hater. Point after point after point. These atheists make fools of themselves. They're brilliant people if they stay in their own field. But they don't stay in their own field. Like some horses next door to us, they get out of their field and get into our place. But, they simply are uninformed. And I enjoy pointing out their error, even their grammatical errors. But this inscription over the cross is quite simple. Just put it all together. This is Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. It's all there. It doesn't say this is all that was over the cross. This was there. It said the King of the Jews. It said the King of the Jews. It's no big deal, just because you don't have the whole thing. There's no contradiction at all. See, if the Bible is true, then men must be aware of the fact that there's a place called hell, and there's a place called heaven, and that every man is going to be held accountable for Christ, to answer to Christ. And I don't, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have to have the archaeologists' support. And some Christians are scared to death that tomorrow some archaeologist is going to turn a spade over dirt and find where the Bible is disproved. Folks, that's silly. In fact, the opposite has been happening for the last 35 years. Even Walt Albright, who was known as a great archaeologist, and he was a Jew, and he admitted he used to ridicule those who used the Old Testament for archaeological work. He ended up using the Bible to do his work. One of the top archaeologists in the world from Harvard University. The opposite has happened because the last 35 years, the support has been toward the support of the Bible and the 6-day creation. As I said, we don't need it, but it's nice to have. I like to see, I just enjoy seeing people who are so arrogant made to look like fools. And time again, these people have done that, and they never learn their lesson. They keep coming back time after time after time. And we can be thrilled that the Bible is true from beginning to end. And as I said, our eternal salvation is at stake. It better be true. And it is totally reliable. Okay, any questions? I'll be glad to answer them if I can. I'm not sure about the time. Okay, we're in good shape.
We're in good shape.
Good shape.
Get back.
And if I don't know the answer, I'll let Brother Waite do it.
Okay, who's got the first one? Yes.
What about when scientists found the Lucy? I think it was they called it an early hominid or something like that.
He's asking about Lucy, when
Yeah.
Lucy was found.
Yeah. What is your answer to that?
That's a good question. I deal with that in a couple of my books. Lucy, they don't even think Lucy was a female now. And they found that she had long fingers. You know, she had, in fact, a lot of the characteristics of an ape or a gorilla. That's exactly what we've said. Zuckerman was the top ape expert or a human skeleton expert from England, and he said that whenever you find these alleged ape men, they're either ape or they're men, one or the other. And nothing, not the ape man, the in between. There's no such thing. And Lucy was supposed to be one of the answers, but it's not so at all. And they said they're not even sure of the sex of the alleged individual. And but Lucy, like Skull 4070 of Leakey and others, it's passe now. And they make a big splash. What happens is they come up with in fact, there's one man said these evolutionists find a skull or a bone or whatever, and they run like crazy, and they run to have a news conference and talk about how we found the missing link, and everybody's thrilled and they're famous for a few weeks, and then they're made to look like fools. And there have been many cases like this.
Amen. Another question. Yes, we're here. John, and then Jill.
On YouTube, there's this evangelist called Anita Buntes, and there was this thing about CERN, about how the scientists over there in Europe with the big colander thing are thinking of trying to, with the use of the CERN, break the protective shield of the Earth and replace it with a man-made one. Have you ever heard of that?
No, sir.
Nothing.
No, sir. Good nothing about it.
Bill, what you got?
On that, back to Lucy again for a minute. That was an Australopithecine. That particular creature, when they found Lucy, it didn't have any feet.
Sorry.
But they proposed that it was an ape man. They made statues of it, what they thought it would look like. They were installed in zoos and everything else, and all 5 toes were lined up on those feet that were actually missing. But if you examine other Australopithecines, the toe is far back on the foot, just like our thumb is back behind our fingers.
Yes. In fact, they did that with one of the other, something comparable to that, with Nebraska man. All they found was a tooth. Just found a tooth. And the London Daily News had a picture of Nebraska man sitting around a fire with his wife beside him, all from one single tooth. Just a tooth, that's all. And then they found out that the tooth wasn't even human, it belonged to a pig. I'd be embarrassed if I were an evolutionist, I really would. Now there's some guys that are more reasonable, and they've got to come up with some, we're here, how did we get here? And they don't want to say God did it, and so they used to have the steady state where it's always been here. Well, that eliminates the problem of how we got here. We've always been here, but that's contrary to the law. Everything has to have a beginning or an end and an end. And but now they tell us that nothing created. They no longer take this steady state position. In fact, I don't know any evolutionist, any scientist that does now. But they say that nothing created everything. How did nothing? What is nothing? Aristotle said that nothing is what rocks dream about. But they're telling me that nothing created everything. They say, well, yes, it's absurd to say that a creator, God created everything, God spoke and everything came to exist. I mean, that's silly. Wait a minute. You mean to tell me that it's more reasonable to say that nothing created everything? Not created something, nothing created everything. I mean, they say, well, there was out in space. I said, wait a minute, where'd space come from? They expect me to give them that. I'm not going to give them. Where did space come from? Well, they don't know. But there was space, and on one side, a little egg appeared, a cosmic egg, about the size of a pin. And inside that was encapsulated everything you see. Say what? Everything. Everything around, everything in the world, everything in the universe was in that little pin. And that little organic egg circulated in space, and all at once it exploded. And I said, well, in fact, I want to know where the egg come from. Maybe from the cosmic chicken,
Did you ask them if they were members of the Magicians Guild?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think the Indians had the answer. Talked to some Indians that they said everything hatched out of a big egg.
Let's start with what?
In some of the Indian mythology,
yes,
they claim an egg hatched everything too.
Yeah,
Egg hatched everything.
An egg.
Yes, Randy. Okay. Next question. Another question. Yes. Anyone? All other questions?
It's interesting. The evolutionists are desperate people. They feel better by talking about no God, and that they have major problems. First of all, the biggest problem is how they got here, and some of them deny saying that nothing created everything because they know that sounds so stupid. It is so stupid, and that embarrasses them. And they deny even making that statement. The fact is, I've got all kinds of quotes that top evolutionists believe that nothing created everything. And then they've got another problem is, all right, you got the world here. How did life first get started? I mean, you've got nothing but rocks here, literally nothing but rocks. And how did life first start? They said, well, what the old way was spontaneous combustion. However, no sane person believes that. And there's still, Wall is a Nobel Prize winner. And he said, yeah, with enough time, anything can happen. No, that's not true with enough time. And but that's the big hurdle is how do you get from nothing, that is nothing but rocks, to life, whether it's plant life or whatever. And they don't have that answer. It's so much easier just simply believe that God created everything.
Any other questions? We change the subject.
Yes, sir.
What's happening to our country? Where's it going? And why?
Oh my. Well,
Just a question here. Let's take this first. Jacob, what you got?
Okay, sir. Thank you for the pitching this morning, Mr. Woods. What's I getting at? Oh yeah, the latest scam they got is they want to sell kids to outer space. It was Dawkins or Hitchens, I forget which one, in that documentary Expelled. I forget what the subtitle of that documentary was, but no intelligence. Something. Oh yeah, Dawkins or Hitchens. One of them said in that documentary that they said, well, when that guy asked him in the documentary where did the original cause, originate, he said from aliens, outer space aliens. They're desperate. I seen on the news a couple weeks ago. They were saying that they expect to find NASA expects to find life in space, but unfortunately it's like an amoeba or something. So they're desperate and petty. That's about all I have to say. And thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Let's wave to Jacob. We're in Texas. You're way out of Texas. What's your head,
that's exactly right. And that's for Penn Smyrna. They believe that life came from outer space and came through maybe rocks, meteorites, came to Earth. And of course, they would say that it's impossible. It couldn't survive the entry into our atmosphere because of heat. But anyway, that's how desperate they are. Rather than just believing that in the beginning God created the heavens and earth, they believe that somehow from outer space life came and then it evolved down here. But even then, folks, if that's true, that doesn't answer the problem. Where did that life come from? You got to have an answer for that. And let me tell you something. It's my firm opinion that most of this space exploration is simply to prove there's life on another planet. In fact, if you read some of the statements that the astronauts have made, that's the reason they want to go to Mars, want to send a probe to Mars and other planets to prove there's life out there. After all, they say if man could evolve here, he could evolve out there also. But they haven't proved he evolved here. That's an assumption that they made.
Any other question on this?
I didn't answer my question. No.
What's happening in this country? Where's it going and why?
Well, you've heard of something going someplace in a handbasket, right? And I'm afraid that our nation's in bad trouble. And I'm not a Republican, but I used to be. I was elected to the House of Representatives as a Republican, a Reagan Republican, my own designation. But I'm totally independent now. I have more respect for some Democrats than I do for some Republicans who say one thing and do something else.
Yes.
And if you'd have told me 12 years ago that we'd be where we are today, I said there's no way. No way we could be that where we are financially, where we are concerning marriage, where we are for crime, welfare. No way. I'd say it's going to be bad. And it may get that way 100 years, but not in 10, 12 years. It's astounding. And in fact, the sea change in homosexuality is the greatest change in a culture since the beginning of time. Only in a few years, we've seen such a major change in the last 10 years. And we can credit that, of course, to the public school system and to the media and to the very shallow thinking of young people. But then the young people, our production, we have to take some of the blame. We also have to take some of the blame because we rear those children and fail to teach them right. And pastors in churches fail. And Christian schools and public schools fail. But I'm not normally a pessimist, but I am sure a pessimist here. I do not believe I do not believe that some of the talk show hosts that our greatest days are ahead of us. I don't believe that at all.
No.
And I don't believe we're going to have great revival. I believe we could have local revivals anytime we meet God's conditions. That's not going to happen, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I sure hope I'm wrong. But I see massive, massive political and financial problems soon. Now, I've been saying it about financially for a few years, and I'm off on the timing. But I don't think I'm wrong, because you can't be $18 trillion in debt and keep spending, and we're borrowing millions of dollars every minute. And we can't keep that up. It just simply is not possible. And so I believe we've got massive, massive financial problems ahead. If you're in debt, you ought to get out of debt, in my opinion.
Yes, Randy.
And when people lift up the environment, they rescue the environment, everything for the environment, humans are always considered the enemy of the environment.
Yes.
Do you have any, is there an explanation of why humans aren't considered part of the environment or part of this process of even evolution? I mean, even if you were an evolutionist, which we're not, but why are humans not part of it? They're just the enemy, alien of it. Why?
Good question. In fact, great question. Did you realize that man from the beginning has been rebellion against God? And even back to Satan, he wanted to be like God, did not want to submit to God. And so I believe today men refuse to admit that God is supreme, and they've made the environment God. They even talk about Gaia, worshiping God, the earth. That is paganism, and I believe that's just indicative of total unbelief and disbelief. And everybody has to believe something, basically. And this in love with the environment. And hey, I'm a pilot. I'm a fisherman. I like to be a clean environment. I like that. And we shouldn't throw things. You know, I'm all for that. But if they go to extremes, they worship the environment. They worship the creation rather than the creator. And it's just simply another false religion, in my opinion.
Yes, Joe.
In your opinion, I'm just thinking, but what do you think? You know how they're, like you were saying, elevating the environment and minimizing man. Well, do you think they might be doing that to, eventually and maybe further along the depopulation agenda that they have for the country? I think that could be indirectly related.
It could be, as you know, that some of the major people and famous people have advocated, depopulation. They want millions of people to die because they say we're far overpopulated. And
in fact, they say 24 million by 2025. 78% dead. The United States alone, 24 million.
That will satisfy a lot of the extremists out there. We need to realize we're an average common people, but they're nuts out there, and they're in high places. I mean, there's a better word than that. So I don't know what it is. It's sort of crackpots, and we believe outrageous things, and we simply can't believe that any sane person would believe something like that. But they're out there, and they think we're crazy.
Another question. Yes, Pastor Dan.
Two questions. First one is about if somebody has interest in history, like a young person in high school, they would want to attend a college in the United States. What would be a good college that would teach, or a good history program, we would say, that would not be skewed to reinterpret history?
Well, secular or Christian, religious, or both?
Probably a combination of both. One of each, maybe, or two of each.
I think that liberty would be reasonable in that area that I'm talking about. Now, when somebody asks me, what about where you bring somebody to be a preacher or a missionary? That's one thing altogether. And if somebody's going to law or medicine or whatever, I'd recommend Liberty University. And Falwell and I knew him for 55 years, but we weren't close friends. But his associate there is one of my closest buddies, going back to college days. But I had problems with Liberty. I don't like the music. I don't like some of the non-Baptist professors they have, and some of the other things they have. But I say, someone asked the question, I say, Liberty would probably do a good job. Hillsdale College in Michigan would be a great. They're secular, but frankly, they have to have emphasis on principle and accuracy, and so I wouldn't mind sending my son. I don't like any secular education, but I wouldn't be disappointed if I had a child that went to Hillsdale.
Second question, President.
Second question, as far as going back to the elections that happened in this country in 2016, as far as any females that would be running for president on either side, which do you know any? I mean, other than Mrs. Clinton?
Miss who?
Other than Mrs. Clinton?
And we know we're not going there.
Okay, no, that's right.
And again, I don't care whether you're Democrat. I don't give a flip whether the person's Democrat or Republican. I really don't. Generally, the Republican platform is supposed to be more conservative and anti-abortion and so forth, but again, sometimes the platforms don't mean much. I don't have a problem with a female president. What I would resent is that we play into that agenda that we've got to have a female. I don't. If she's more competent than Cruz or Walker or whomever, I'd go for her. I would probably vote for Palin. She is probably far more informed now than she was a few years ago. But I would probably vote. I know I would vote for her above any of the Democratic candidates thus far they're talking about. But the senator from Iowa, I forget her name now, I would probably vote for her. So there's some good choices out there on the Republican Party, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few months. The sifting now that takes place in all the debates, and some will catch on, and maybe just we don't even know who he is right now, or she.
Henry,
Let's follow up. There's a lady I just became familiar with recently. Her name is Carly, who's thinking about running. She had some position with some computer company.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you know anything about her background? Or?
Just what I've heard of her sounds good. I don't know that much about her, but what I've heard and I've heard her speak, she's impressive. Yes.
Henry.
No.
Oh, that's right, John.
What's your view of Michelle Bachmann?
Again, from what I know about her, she's a impressive lady. She. Sometimes, when you're in the public eye, you say something, but sometimes if you don't say it carefully, see, I found out that they love to make you look like a nut, and if you're not careful, that's why they make like fresh meat in a Shark Tank. I mean, they go after you, and so I try to be careful and not let them. And I found that sometimes they can edit what you say. I had Jerry Springer, his editor, made me look like a nut, and because he said something and I corrected him, and that didn't show up on the show, my correction, and that's really dishonest. But that's why I was asked to do the daily show, Comedy Central or Comedy something. Jon Stewart.
Yes.
I was asked to do that show and agreed to do it, and the day I could come to New York and all that, but and then I said, I'll of course record it. He said, what? The producer said, what? And I said, I'll record it. Why would you want to do that? I said, because I don't trust you all. And he gave me, this was assistant producer, or what they call segment producer, and he gave me to the top producer, and we went through the same thing. And I said, no, I insist on recording it, because I said, I know that if it's live, I'll come. I don't mind. If it's live, I'll take any show live. But no, if you're going to record it, I want to record it also. And if you're dishonest, I'll point it out on the next show I do for somebody else. That you're disreputable and dishonest. And so he backed off. He wouldn't let me do it. So I said, well, no, I'm not going to do your show. But because you got to be careful what you say. And sometimes Michelle Bachmann and some of the others, if they're fairly new in dealing with the media, can say some things that can be disastrous. You never get away from it. And the people will for years, will keep playing the same thing and passing on the same errors. So, I don't know, but she's a great lady as far as I know.
Other questions?
Yes.
Can organisms adapt to the environment, as in like small form of evolution?
Of course, organisms adapt. There's no question about that. That's right. And it's one thing to adapt. Another thing, they talk about the bacteria. The fact is, there's never, here's the key, never new information. It's always an adaptation. And the rabbits adapt, and the snow and their fur and all that, they can adapt. It's going to be real cold. They get a heavier fur. That's adapting to the environment. But never is a new information. That's the key. Because if there's new information, you have to ask to the evolutionists, where did it come from? And that's what was asked of Dawkins. He was asked by a television crew from Australia about new information, where it came from. And you all familiar with that? Anyway, Dawkins looked all around the room, and I believe it's 11 seconds passed, and he said, turn off the machine, turn off the camera. And they turned off the cameras. And this crew had another camera over here that it was a new camera. They were simply experimenting with it. They turned off the main camera, and so he could get his thoughts. But the other camera kept going. Went for 19 seconds. And he didn't have the answer. And finally, when they turned the other camera back on, he gave a non-answer, made himself look silly. And this is Dawkins, #1 new atheist in America today. And now he's lying about it. When you get home, type in Dawkins stumped, and you'll see. You can see I think you can see the whole thing. You can see the crew from Australia put the 19 seconds. They talk about, I think, 11 seconds, 19 seconds, and he didn't know the answer. He didn't have an answer to come up with. And what he did say was a non-answer didn't have any relevance to the question that was asked. So that's the question: is where the new information come from? If it's new information, you've got evolution. You don't have new information.
Sure, Randy.
Just briefly, when they say that something, nothing produces something, I just noticed they use terms like nothing created or a miraculous thing about even the atheists, evolutionists, they use created, which implies intelligence, or it's miraculous, which implies God.
Yeah, yes, but they just say that that's not their meaning of the term. But the creationists have gotten in a real problem over the years because some of the top scientists in America have jumped ship. And Flew was the #1 atheist in the world, and he jumped ship. He couldn't take it anymore, and he turned his back on atheism and evolution. And so have some other major atheists and evolutionists. And now, of course, there are thousands of American PhDs who have questions about and refuse to accept evolution. And I've had them, they've said, there's not one qualified scientist in America who believes in creationism. That's one of the most outrageous, untrue, stupid statements anybody can make. Because you can go online and find that there are over many thousands of scientists from accredited universities, not just Liberty and some of the other Christian universities, but from all the universities. And some who, once they get tenure at the universities, they can say what they want to say. And until then, they have to be very careful with it because they get fired. But there have been a number of men who are outspoken creationists, who are at major universities right now, who are Bible, they may not be Christians, but they're creationists. And some are Christians too. But anyway, that's thrilling, and that gives the evolutionists fit.
Anna. And then this one. Anna, you have something?
But I had a question, but I don't.
You don't have it anymore?
Well, yes, but I'm confused if you want me to talk about something else.
So talk about something else.
You're raising your hand.
Any question?
Well, we were talking about bacteria briefly, and then that made me think about viruses, and viruses seem very confusing because scientists don't seem to know how to classify them. So I was just wondering if you had any ideas.
No, not as far as classification. I know nothing about that.
Okay.
But whether it's a virus or whatever it is, the secret is they change. Everything's changing. Men today are much taller than they were even 100 years ago. So people are changing. And see, this is what the evolutionists have done in recent years. They have changed this they said, do you believe in change? Well, everybody believes in change. You're a fool if you don't believe in change. And so they said, yes, of course I believe in change. So facto, you're an evolutionist. That's silly and dishonest. Of course we believe in change, but not a change from one creature to another. All the fossils, billions of fossils have been found. Never has there been one that's changed from intermediate fossil from one creature. A dog is always a dog. A cat is always a cat. A horse is always a horse, of course. It's always that way. Never creature changes. Never.
Henry and then this lady. Henry and then this one.
Yeah.
And then Randy. Three of them. Quick.
I just wanted to bring up another person that you
Fire
can
us
Google. If you Google Dr. Kent Hovind, you will find some very strong teachings, but they're also comical. They make fun of the opposition, and it's very entertaining, but it's also very, very good information.
Kent is a longtime friend of mine. He's been in my home. I've been in his, and know his family. It's one of the tragedies today that he's sitting in a federal pen right now, and don't have time to go into all that. But I think sometime, maybe in the future, I don't agree with every position he's taken, by the way. That's all right too. But I believe in time we'll look back on him as one of our heroes.
Yes, this lady right here.
So is it possible for religion to take over like an election, like a person with a certain religion and there's other people that support that religion more than other religions, so would they vote for it? Is it like possible?
Not sure.
Possible for religions to be elected? Somebody who's religious?
Oh yes, I think so. Of course, it depends on what. As far as being a born-again Christian, it would be very difficult. But there have been many religious people.
Muslim.
Yeah, and I found in office it's very difficult. If you stand for what you really believe in, you're not going to do much. And I have people often say, you're interested in going back to politics, and I have absolutely no desire. Because I'd be in trouble all the time. The only reason I had some effectiveness when I was in office is because there were 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats. And they had to have me. They had to have my vote to do anything because of the close, if somebody's absent and all. So they had, that's why the governor had to court me. And he knew I was independent as a hog on ice. And so they had to have my vote. If the Republicans wanted to do anything, they had to come to me. They didn't like that because they knew I was, active. And I didn't make such a major deal of it. I'm just a Christian, and I let them know that. And but that's why I would have no interest in further office.
Do you think the reference in Genesis, Book of Genesis, where each creature would be made after its own kind, is that reference to that partition between species?
I sure do.
I think it is.
Yes, I sure do. And the early Christians were not precise in that, in my opinion, in that interpretation. And that's why you don't have the crossing of the boundaries of the different creatures. You can't go wrong in believing in God's program, God's plan, God's book. And the people can ridicule, they can laugh all they want, but we're winners. We're winners, and we got the answers.
Dr. and Mrs. Boyce have to leave at 3 o'clock sharp. They have a 3-hour journey to the next preaching mission tonight. And what state again?
Maryland.
So we can't take too much time extra, but I'd like to ask the whole crowd a question. You ready?
Yes.
Do you see why I invited this man last year and this year?
Yes.
Can he come next year?
We're glad to.
If we're still around.
Yeah.
Any more final questions?
You and I are not getting any younger, you know that.
I know. He's 80, he's turned 80, and I'm 87. Next year he'll be 81, I'll be 88. We're still here.
Right.
Okay, Todd, one more.
My aunt's husband is creation scientist from Institute for Creation Research. When it was still at Texas, I think they moved, but his name is Dr. John Baumgartner, Baumgartner. Have you ever heard of him before?
ICI.
Don't think so, no.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to have Dr. and Mrs. Boyce to go to the door so they can say hello to you. And then we'll, as soon as they get back there, we'll close with a word of prayer. Our Father, we thank Thee for this good information, Dr. Boyce. Give them a safe journey as they travel these 3 hours, and give them a good meeting tonight. Bless their ministry, and we look forward to seeing them in the Dean Bergen Society in Garland, Texas, this next July. In Jesus' name we thank Thee. Amen. Thank you for coming, all of you. Let me get back here, then you can take off.